Have you ever just woken up, stared blankly at the ceiling of your bedroom, and felt this sudden, heavy weight drop right into your stomach? You know the feeling. It's that creeping suspicion that maybe, just maybe, everything you're experiencing right now isn't the final version. What if you, your thoughts, your deepest struggles, and even the very words you're hearing in this explainer right now are just part of an intricately designed experiment? Today, we're diving into an unsettling, deeply existential question that honestly might just keep you awake tonight. Let's really think about the illusion of reality.
I want you to literally look around your room right now. Look at the walls, your hands, the light filtering in through the window. It all feels so incredibly solid, doesn't it? But what if all of this just isn't the real thing? What if the life you're living right this second is basically just a draft? We walk through our days assuming our reality is absolute and fixed. But then there are those moments, those fleeting, fragile little moments, when the facade just seems to slip. Think about your daily grind for a second. The alarm clock ringing at the exact same time every morning, scrolling through your phone, sitting in traffic, working, sleeping, and then repeating the whole shebang. When you step back and really look at the sheer, unyielding repetition of human existence, you kind of have to ask, is this your actual life, or is it just a test run? It's almost as if we're trapped in this absurd loop, some cosmic beta test, where a cold, unseen researcher is just quietly observing how we handle the exact same mundane pressures day in and day out.
And honestly, it's not just the repetition. Think about how we're conditioned from the very moment we're born. When you're a kid, you're told that school is just practiced for the real world. Then you get a job, and well, it's just a series of stepping stones for your career. We are constantly living for this future baseline that never actually seems to arrive. And that forces a pretty terrifying realization. When does the real thing actually begin? We treat our current existence like a warm-up, a mere preparation for a grand opening that, quite frankly, might not even exist.
Now, this feeling of profound existential doubt, it isn't just you overthinking at 2 a.m. It's actually deeply rooted in human psychology. Take derealization, for example. That's when the physical world suddenly feels like a hollow movie set, and everyone around you feels like a scripted extra in a film. Or depersonalization, which is even more intimate and unsettling. It's that eerie sensation of floating outside your own body, watching yourself make decisions like a player controlling an avatar in a video game. And what's truly haunting here is the sheer scale of this phenomenon. 75% of people have experienced this terrifying detachment at least once in their lives. Let that sink in. This isn't just some quirky psychological glitch. This is a massive, collective, melancholic realization of our shared alienation. It's as if, under enough stress or grief, 3/4 of humanity briefly wakes up just enough to see the strings holding up the scenery. So, this psychological dread eventually gave birth to some incredibly rigorous academic theory. Back in 2003, Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom published a paper that completely shook both the scientific and philosophical communities. He essentially argued that if humanity survives long enough to create conscious simulated realities, then the number of those simulated worlds will vastly outnumber the one true base reality. Which leads us to a pretty haunting conclusion, famously championed by tech visionaries like Elon Musk. If Bostrom's logic holds up, the probability that we are currently living in base reality, meaning the true, physical, original universe, is roughly 1 in a billion. Seriously, take a second with that. 1 in a billion. Statistically speaking, it's almost a mathematical certainty that we're inside a machine, inside a program, inside some grand test. But look, it's not just tech billionaires making these kinds of claims. Respected physicists like Neil deGrasse Tyson have looked at the exponential advancement of our own artificial intelligence and virtual reality and concluded that it's a terrifying 50-50 coin toss, a literal dead-even chance that our universe is a simulation. I mean, we're already building rudimentary universes in our own computers. Why are we so arrogant to assume we aren't inside someone else's? Okay, so if we are in a simulation, then surely there'd be errors, right? Little flaws in the code. Enter the Mandela effect. This is where a massive collective of people share a vivid, highly specific memory of something that, well, never actually happened in our current timeline. People distinctly remembering a cornucopia in the Fruit of the Loom logo, or the precise timing of events that history books say happened entirely differently. What if these aren't just collective brain misfires? What if they're literally patch updates, edits made to our reality by the observer, leaving behind eerie fragments of a deleted timeline? And what about déjà vu? That sudden, overwhelming certainty that you've lived this exact moment, spoken these exact words before. Science calls it a neurological misfire, but in the context of a giant experiment, Are déjà vu and changing memories actually glitches in the matrix? Are they memory leaks from a previous version of the simulation that was quietly reset? It really makes you wonder how many times you've lived this exact day. To find evidence for this, we don't just look at human memory. We actually have to look at the very fabric of matter itself. Quantum physics reveals something deeply, deeply unsettling. In the famous double-slit experiment, a particle exists in a superposition, meaning it occupies all possible states at once until it is observed. The very act of looking at the particle forces it to collapse into a single, fixed reality. The universe literally changes its behavior depending on whether or not someone is watching. It's absolutely wild. And if reality is that flexible, we really have to consider the many worlds interpretation. This theory posits that at every single point of decision, a bifurcation point, reality splits. There's a version of you who quit their job yesterday existing in a parallel timeline right now, which forces the ultimate existential question upon us. If there are infinite versions of you running infinite scenarios, which one is the real you? And which one is just a beta test generating data for the other? Now, this anxiety, this creeping feeling of being an experiment, it isn't just some modern technological glitch. It echoes through millennia. Back in 400 BC, Plato described humanity as prisoners in a cave, mistaking shadows on the wall for absolute reality. In ancient Eastern and Middle Eastern traditions, we see concepts like samsara and darulfana, the idea that this world is temporary, a cycle of learning, an illusion, a test. Humanity has basically spent thousands of years wrestling with the intense suspicion that this life is merely a waiting room. So, how exactly do we cope with this immense, crushing, cosmic dread? Well, we turn to the existentialists. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre famously declared, "Existence precedes essence." You are thrust into this world, this potential simulation, without a manual, without a script, and without an inherent, pre-packaged purpose. You just are. You are condemned to be free. There is no predetermined essence you must fulfill. You have to write the code yourself. His contemporary, Albert Camus, took this a step further with the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is condemned by the gods to push a massive boulder up a hill only to watch it roll right back down for all eternity. It is the ultimate repetitive, seemingly meaningless experiment. But Camus argues that we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because the very act of pushing the boulder, the sheer defiant rebellion against the absurdity and meaninglessness of the experiment, is the meaning itself. And from this cosmic dread emerges a genuinely beautiful synthesis. As the philosopher Alan Watts said, "You are the universe experiencing itself." If this life is an experiment, if we're gathering data in a simulated reality, then you aren't just the lab rat. You are the scientist. You are the universe's way of feeling pain, feeling joy, tasting coffee, and falling in love. The experiment isn't happening to you. The experiment is you. So you're faced with a monumental choice. You can live your whole life waiting for the real life to start. You can be passive, compromise your dreams, and treat today like a rough draft you'll edit later. But that is the true trap of the simulation. Or you can fully embrace the experiment. Whether it's base reality or lines of code running on a server, the pain you feel when you fall is undeniably real to you. The tears you cry are valid. The connections you make absolutely matter. And this realization provides a perfectly practical philosophy for our everyday lives. Just think about how a scientist views a laboratory. In an experiment, a failure is never the end. It's simply data. Mistakes aren't permanent scars. They are necessary feedback. A failed test is incredibly valuable because it teaches the system exactly what doesn't work. If your life is a trial run, then your failures are literally the most valuable data points you possess. So how do you actually live in a world that might be a complete illusion? You run the experiment fully. Try new things. Break your sterile everyday routines. Take risks that terrify you. Don't just make mistakes. Make spectacular, glorious mistakes. Collect as much emotional, physical, and intellectual data as humanly possible. Because if you really are in a simulation, the absolute least you can do is make whoever programmed this thing thoroughly impressed with your rebellion. We started this explainer by asking if your life is just a test. And look, I don't have the final answer. No one does. But the very fact that you can pause, reflect, and genuinely examine your reality is what gives it such profound weight. As Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So tomorrow, when you wake up and stare at the ceiling, don't be afraid of the existential dread. Embrace it. You are fully awake inside the experiment. The only question left is, what are you going to test next?